Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann with Gold Derby here with Colman Domingo, star this year of Rustin and The Color Purple. And, I couldn't stop Coleman when I was watching Rustin thinking about how this man has largely been underappreciated, underacknowledged in the telling of our history. And yet you watch this film and he has such a presence. He takes up so much space in a room when he enters. And I'm just curious, when you were researching, what initially grabbed you about him?
Well, first of all, thanks for that. The thing that I thought was very interesting was like how suppressive history can be, especially if you're going to suppress such a profound figure like Bayard Rustin, because he was openly gay, which they were discounting the fact that he organized the March on Washington. He was such a great influence on Dr. King in many ways. He was one of the greatest strategists and organizers that this country had ever seen. Um, and that it feels, like the perfect moment to sort of like bring him out of the shadows of history. The fact that the Obamas chose this to be their first narrative feature is also very profound, because also Obama presented Bayard Rustin posthumously with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and he said he truly meant this, is the fact that there would be no Barack Obama if there was not Bayard Rustin, because he really admired him and all his skills and what he did, what he did for our country. And the fact that he's been unsung is a travesty, but that shows you the tricky nature of history and why we have to interrogate our history and then pull these stories out and make sure that we're not just looking at the lens of who's getting the spotlight, but we look to who's on the left and who's on the right of that spotlight and tell their stories too.
Yeah, that's a great, it's interesting. We see in this film, especially towards the end, how humble he is as the architect
Mm.
of the March on Washington. How do you think Bayard would react knowing Obama would eventually give him that medal and we'd have this film of him one day?
I think Walter Nagel, his partner, said that I think he would be very pleased. There's something about Bayard that is a showman, and that's the part that I wanted to capture about him. That like everyone said, when Bayard would enter a room, you would know it, you would feel it, and you'd feel excited. And he had a charisma and a charm that he can charm any, he can sell ice to an Eskimo. He had that power. So I know that was important to share that, because it's I don't know. It's just tremendous when you really look at examine the whole man and the person.
Well, some of that charm, I mean, comes across in your physicality and especially the voice. I was trying to pinpoint what accent, where the origin of his accent is. I couldn't figure it out. What walk us
Good.
through that?
I'm
How
gonna
you
walk you
captured that?
through it. I'm gonna tell you why, and that makes so much sense. Because in my research of Bayard, interviews, debates, personal conversations, you name it, he has a sort of mid-Atlantic standard accent that sort of comes and goes. And at times it sounds a bit more British. And so I was a little frustrated because I was trying to find the voice. And then I was like, what is this accent? And then sometimes it would go away completely. And his voice is maybe 3 octaves higher than mine in pitch and a bit reedier. And so I was working to get that. And then I was really trying to unpack this accent. And I asked Rochelle Horowitz, who is featured in the film as one of the organizers of the March with Bayard, what is this accent? And she said, oh, he made that up. So he used it as a tool, I think, in many ways. I think he was also creating his own version of himself, which is interesting, which is why sometimes it sounds a little bit like Katharine Hepburn. It sounds a little bit like Betty Davis, you name it, but it really is a mid-Atlantic standard. The R's are dropped, things like that. At times, sometimes there's a bit more flourish than usual, but I think he used it to great effect. I think he used it to dismantle a room in a way. I think he already was walking in queer and black. So I think the thing that he can use as a tool is language. That's what a smart person can do. They use their wit, they use their intelligence, and you can also use language to get what you want, to disarm people. So I used it in the film in different scenes in different ways. Sometimes, when he was being a bit more vulnerable, a bit softer, the accent sort of went away. And then at times when he wanted to be a bit more elevated or really command the room or press his point, he would give a bit more of a flourish, but
Yeah.
each one was very specific.
Well, that flourish, speaking of language, he just the way you speak in this film almost sounds like poetry. I kept hearing lines and said, "Oh, I have to remember that." Like there's an
Mm.
amazing one where he's when they're planning the brainstorming the March on Washington, and he says, "Don't kill an impulse before it's even
It's
born."
born. Yeah.
Um, which I thought, this man with such energy, how much of him, like, do you think was working off of impulse versus sitting back, kind of being the architect, carefully planning?
I think that was an underlying part of his personality. That he worked off of impulse. He was fiery and passionate. Um, he was sexual. He had a good time doing it as well, and he always had a lot of young people around him. He was inspired by people. He wanted people who were not set up in their ways. He didn't think you can create from that spirit. You must create from a liberated space of I don't know and of play. And so I think that was the most beautiful thing. So I think that he called on people to come up with ideas. Let's have ideas and be free and liberate ourselves. Because also he's one of those people. If you look at him just as a human being, he didn't put himself in any boxes as well. So he liberated himself at a time when it wasn't you know popular to liberate yourself, whether it's from communities or your family or ideals or that the world may have about you. He was already liberated.
Sure. And I mean, you even have, there's a really wonderful, impactful scene where you say, on the same day I was born Black, I was also born homosexual. And he was saying things like that at a time where there was not a lot of, or not many at all, role models in the public eye,
Yeah,
especially
there was no thing about being intersectionality. You know what I mean? The
yeah.
idea that he can be both, that he's both of these things, and he can have both of those things at the same time. And I think that because it always seems to be like this dissonance where it's like, oh, you're either fighting for this or that. And he's like, no, I'm fighting for both because that's who I am, you know?
Was there something in your research that you found, like, that you think maybe is the catalyst of that? Like, where did he get that sense from, do you think?
Huh. In my research, I thought when the moment I found out that he staged a protest in high school, like for the lunches, the food was garbage, apparently. The idea that a young person can always say, no, we deserve better. Where does that come from? That was already a clue to me. It's like it let me know how he was raised, um, how he was set up in the world. I think you're set up in the world that way. And he's like, that's my North Star. I actually devote my life to righting wrongs. And it doesn't feel like in my mind, I don't think that it seemed like work for him. It just seemed like a part of what needs to be done. He was an ordinary human being doing extraordinary things just by, just saying, hey, that's not right. Let's make it better. Yeah, you know what I mean? Where does that come from? So that was a great sort of keystone to him as a character. Because I also thought that he had a good time doing it. It wasn't like, oh God, here's the work, and like he's beat himself, flogging himself about it. He's like saying, oh no, this is the work, and it's exciting because actually we're gonna make this country better. How hot and sexy is that?
Well, yeah, speaking of your work in this film too, you're reuniting with George C. Wolfe
Yeah.
after Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And I remember the last time we talked, you told me that George was the most demanding director you'd ever worked with because he required you to unknow yourself. Still is. So, well, how was it this time? How was the coming back with him as a
Even more
director?
demanding.
Still.
No, you know what? I think that he's demanding in all the great ways that an actor needs. He expects you to do your very best, or at least attempt to do as much research, to have as much passion daily, because he comes with that. So I think he's got such a great esteem for his work. He demands you have that esteem and then some. And that's where you establish trust. And that's where you establish grace. He's one of my favorite collaborators because I think that's because he is that demanding. I'm happy that he doesn't applaud every take that I do, that he knows I'm in process. And he says, good, want to do another? because we're still working. You know what I mean? He's saying, let's not rest on our laurels. Let's not rest on, yes, that was good and that was wonderful. Let's not applaud these moments. Let's keep going to the end. You know, he gives encouragement, but the encouragement is about like, let's keep going. Good, keep going, more. And I think that keeps you ferocious in your excavation of character and story.
Yeah. Well, you have another role this year too in the Color Purple musical film, and you're playing a much different person, probably the opposite spectrum of Bayard Rustin, with Mr. what many would consider like more of the villain of the piece. What do you get out of that type of totally different role, down a different avenue, playing something more sinister?
Well, it's the wildest thing, and I'm trying to maybe at some point I'll unpack this in a book or something. But I seem to get roles that call on me to swing the complete opposite way all the time. When I did Zola, I did that after I did If Beale Street Could Talk. So I played the most vicious pimp in the world after I played the most loving, supportive, feminist father. That's diametrically different. Now this, I'm playing a civil rights leader and someone who believes in our humanity and all that's good. And now I play the most traumatic, oppressor in film history. I think it's calling on me to examine humanity. Basically, that's what I honestly think. I feel like, how can I look at, because I have to love every character that I play. And I love Mr. And I have to love him and take it from his perspective of who's the villain, of who's the problem, why is he, and then also where does his trauma come from, and why does he hurt other people? So for me, it's just like trying to find out what makes him more human, and I get that beautiful opportunity with my work, and that's a blessing with my work. It's like I haven't been, maybe it's because I've never put myself in a box on what I'm interested or what I do or my abilities. I've always been receiving roles that speak to that, where I can explore something different in my soul, you know? So I think it's quite beautiful, especially at the same time. I'm glad that Rustin comes out first, because there'll be enough love hopefully stored up for them to have for me when they see me in the purple.
Forgive you for Mr. And I think, if I'm correct, it's the first time we've seen you in a musical since the Scottsboro Boys. Is that right?
Yeah, it is actually.
How does that compare? Going from 8 shows a week to making one on film. What is the biggest difference for you?
It's so cool. Well, the good thing is, like, we still have a copious amount of rehearsal for and then recording the songs and stuff like that for the movie musical. But I don't know. I love that we were able to get in there with the scene work and do all that in a very different, nuanced way than we do on stage, which is great. It's really, really awesome. And also, there's such a largeness to this this expression of the color purple. Like, it really does delve into Seeley's imagination. So you do feel like you're part of that it still has a little bit of that size that you have on a musical stage.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about, variety before of your different roles, but you always keep variety. You have a TV series, Fear the Walking Dead, that you've been on. You've contributed to the book of a Broadway musical with Summer, the Donna Summer musical. You were producer of things like Fat Ham on Broadway. So what is that type of variety? Has that always been the goal for you, of these different avenues? What do you get out of that?
Sam, I've been working for over like 32 years. And I started out in the theater very much a multi-hyphenate. I started out in theaters in San Francisco, where I was an actor, director, writer, producer. We made things happen for like $500. So I still feel like I'm doing exactly what I started out doing. It's just now people can see it on larger platforms. And I think I love switching mediums. I feel like I try to be in service to the work wherever it is. And that's exactly why doing this for so long, I do understand that this work is about being in service. So for me, it's like, whatever makes the most sense. If I need to act in this one, if I need to direct this, I need to produce it. That's what I get out of it. I just want to make it happen. And it depends on what skills that are needed for it. And if I have something to give to it, I don't have to be in everything, but I know I can help pull it together or give some skills that are useful. So that's what I get out of it. It's just making it happen.
Well, you certainly made quite a lot happen this year. So congratulations on both Rustin and Color Purple. Always a pleasure, Colman. So everyone watching out there, stick with us at Gold Derby, subscribe, and stick with us the rest of this season. Colman, thank you again.
Thank you, Sam. Good to see you.
You too.